The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 3 years. Maya rolled over in her tiny studio apartment, her body aching from yesterday's double shift. The walls were paper-thin, and she could hear her neighbors. Baby crying through the wall. She stretched her fingers, feeling the familiar stiffness that came from hours of carrying heavy trays and wiping down tables, but these weren't ordinary hands. If you looked closely, you'd notice something different about Maya's fingertips. They were calloused, sure, but not in the way you'd expect from a waitress. These calluses came from something else entirely, something she kept hidden from everyone at work. Maya stumbled to her tiny kitchenette and made instant coffee with water she heated in the microwave. The fancy coffee machine she wanted sat in her Amazon cart, saved for someday when she could afford it. Today wasn't that day. Today was just another day of pretending to be someone she wasn't. She pulled on her black uniform, the same one she'd been wearing for 3 years at the Grand Meridian Hotel. The fabric was starting to fade, and there was a small stain near the pocket that never quite came out, no matter how many times she washed it. Maya tied her long black hair into a tight bun, the way management liked it. Clean, simple, invisible, the bus ride to work took 45 minutes through the city. Maya watched the neighborhoods change through the grimy window as they moved from her rundown area toward the fancy district where she worked. The buildings got taller, cleaner, shinier. The cars got more expensive. The people walking on the sidewalks wore clothes that cost more than Maya made in a month. She used this time to practice fingering exercises, moving her fingers silently against her leg. Other passengers probably thought she was nervous or had some kind of tic. They had no idea she was running through Chopin etudes in her mind, her fingers dancing through complex passages that would make most people's heads spin. The Grand Meridian Hotel rose up like a golden palace against the morning sky. Maya had walked through these doors thousands of times, but she still felt small every time she saw the massive marble lobby with its crystal chandeliers and fresh flower arrangements that probably cost more than her rent. She slipped through the employee entrance in the back, past the dumpsters and loading dock where the real work happened. The employee break room smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaning supplies. Maya hung up her jacket in her tiny locker, the metal door decorated with a small photo of her family back home. "Maya, you're on the Rosewood Ballroom today," called out Mrs. Henderson, the head of catering staff. She was a stern woman in her 50s who'd been working at fancy hotels longer than Maya had been alive. "Big charity thing tonight, lots of important people." "You know the drill?" Maya nodded. She did know the drill. Smile, but not too much. Be helpful, but invisible. Never speak unless spoken to. Never let them see you as anything more than the help. The Rosewood Ballroom was the hotel's crown jewel. Maya had worked hundreds of events in this room, but it still took her breath away sometimes. Today, staff were already setting up for the evening's gala. Round tables covered in white linens filled the space, each one set with more silverware than most people owned. Crystal glasses caught the light from the massive chandeliers hanging overhead, but what really caught Maya's attention was the piano. It sat at the front of the room like a sleeping giant. A Steinway grand piano, its black surface so polished you could see a reflection in it. Maya's fingers itched just looking at it. She knew exactly what those keys would feel like under her touch, how the sound would resonate through the rooms. Perfect acoustics. "Stop staring and start working," snapped Janet, another waitress who'd been there longer than Maya. "That piano's not for people like us." Maya forced herself to look away and got to work. She spent the morning polishing water glasses until they sparkled, folding napkins into perfect swans and arranging flowers that had been flown in from some exotic place she'd probably never visit during her lunch break. Maya sat in the parking garage eating a peanut butter sandwich she'd brought from home. The other staff usually ate in the cafeteria, but Maya preferred the quiet. She pulled out her phone and opened the music app, putting in her earbuds to listen to her favorite classical pieces. As Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 flowed through her headphones. Maya closed her eyes and let her fingers move along with the music. In her mind, she was sitting at that beautiful Steinway, her hands flying across the keys, the music pouring out of her like water from a broken dam. The reality was different. Maya had learned to play on an old, beaten-up piano at the community center when she was 12. Her teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had seen something special in her and convinced her parents to let her take lessons even though they couldn't really afford it. He'd submitted her application to the state conservatory himself, never telling her family how much he'd spent on application fees and prep materials. When Maya got accepted with a full scholarship, it felt like winning the lottery. 4 years of intensive training, surrounded by other young musicians who lived and breathed classical music just like she did. She'd graduated at the top of her class, her professors predicting a brilliant career ahead of her, but life had other plans. Her father's construction accident happened just 2 weeks before graduation. Suddenly, Maya found herself the family's main source of income, with student loans to pay back and medical bills piling up. The conservatory's career services office had lined up auditions for her, but she couldn't afford to travel to them. She couldn't afford to wait for the slow build of a classical music career when her family needed money right now. So Maya took the first job she could find, waiting tables at the Grand Meridian Hotel. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she got back on her feet. That was 3 years ago, now. As she sat in the parking garage listening to the music she should have been performing, Maya wondered if she'd waited too long. Her technique was getting rusty. Her calluses were in the wrong places. Sometimes she caught herself moving her fingers while she worked, and she had to stop herself before anyone noticed. The afternoon shift was busy. Maya restocked the bar, set up additional chairs, and helped the florists arrange massive bouquets around the room. All the while, that piano sat there, calling to her. During a quiet moment, when no one was looking, Maya walked over to it. The bench was the perfect height. The keys were slightly cool under her fingertips as she very gently pressed middle C, so softly it barely made a sound. Even that whisper of music sent chills down her spine. This instrument was incredible. She could feel its potential humming. Under her hands? What are you doing? Maya jumped back as if she'd been burned. Mrs. Henderson stood behind her, arms crossed. Sorry, I was just dusting it, Maya lied, grabbing a cloth from her cart. Well, dust faster. The musicians will be here soon for sound check, and this room needs to be perfect. Maya spent the rest of the afternoon trying not to look at the piano, but she could feel it there like a magnet pulling at her soul. She wondered who would be playing tonight, what pieces they'd chosen, whether they truly appreciated the gift of performing on such a beautiful instrument. As evening approached and Maya changed into her serving uniform for the gala, she made herself a promise. Someday, somehow, she would find her way back to music. She just didn't know that Sunday would be tonight. By 7 o'clock, the Rosewood Ballroom had transformed into something magical. Maya stood at the edge of the room, holding a tray of champagne glasses, watching as the city's most powerful people began to arrive. The chandeliers cast everything in a warm golden glow, and the scent of expensive perfume mixed with fresh roses filled the air. The first guests to walk through the doors looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Women in designer gowns that probably cost more than Maya's yearly rent glided across the marble floor, their jewelry catching the light with every step. The men wore tuxedos that fit them perfectly, custom-made by tailors whose names Maya had only heard whispered by the hotel's concierge staff. Maya recognized some faces from the society pages of newspapers she sometimes flipped through during her breaks. There was Mrs. Wellington, the oil heiress who owned 3 homes and a private jet. She was talking to David Chun, the tech mogul whose company had just gone public for billions. At another table, Maya spotted the mayor's wife, laughing with a group of women whose handbags alone could probably pay for Maya's college loans. Remember, smile but don't stare, Mrs. Henderson whispered as she passed by with her own tray. These people don't like feeling watched. Maya nodded and began her rounds. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, refilling wine glasses and offering appetizers from silver trays. The conversations she overheard felt like they were happening in a different world. People casually mentioned their weekend trips to Paris, their new art collections, and business deals worth millions of dollars. The market's been absolutely wild this quarter, one man was saying to his dinner companion. My portfolio manager says I should diversify into European real estate. Oh, you should talk to Richard, the woman replied, adjusting her diamond necklace. He just bought that lovely chateau in Provence. Though I think he overpaid, it was only 12 bedrooms. Maya tried not to react as she served them their appetizers. 12 bedrooms was considered small. Her entire apartment could fit in one of their walk-in closets at another table. A group of women were discussing their children's private schools. We're thinking of sending Bradley to that boarding school in Switzerland, one said. It's terribly expensive, but the connections he'll make will be worth it. Maya thought about her own education, how she'd worked 3 part-time jobs just to afford textbooks, how she'd eaten ramen noodles for weeks to save money for her conservatory application fees. These people's children would never have to choose between following their dreams and helping their families survive. As the evening progressed, Maya learned this wasn't just any fancy dinner party. This was the annual Children's Hospital Benefit Gala, one of the biggest charity events of the year. The money raised tonight would go directly to the hospital where Maya's younger brother Carlos had spent 2 months when he was 8 years old. She remembered those terrifying weeks when Carlos had been sick. The doctors weren't sure what was wrong with him, and Maya's family had been consumed with worry and medical bills they couldn't afford. The children's hospital had been their lifeline, providing care that saved Carlos's life even when her family couldn't pay for it all up front. Now Carlos was in college, studying to become a teacher. He'd beaten his illness completely, but Maya knew their family was still paying off some of those medical bills. Every month, her parents sent whatever they could to chip away at the debt. Excuse me, miss, a gentle voice said behind her. Maya turned to see an elderly woman in an elegant navy dress. Could you tell me where the restroom is? Of course, Maya said, pointing toward the hallway. Just down that corridor and to your left. Thank you, dear. You know, I've been coming to these galas for 15 years, and I have to say, the service tonight is exceptional. You young people work so hard. Maya felt a warmth in her chest. Most guests barely acknowledged the waitstaff, but this woman had taken the time to be kind. Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate that. As the woman walked away, Maya realized something that made her throat tighten with emotion. The money being raised in this very room tonight might help other families like hers. Other kids like Carlos who needed medical care their families couldn't afford. She was serving the people who were making that possible. The dinner service went smoothly. Maya and the other waitstaff moved efficiently between the kitchen and the ballroom, bringing out course after course of gourmet food. Maya tried not to think about how each plate probably cost more than she made in a day. Instead, she focused on doing her job well, making sure every guest felt taken care of. During a brief break between courses, Maya stood near the service entrance and watched the room. The conversations had grown louder and more animated as the wine flowed. People were laughing, making toasts, and talking excitedly about the evening's entertainment. That's when her eyes drifted back to the piano. It sat there like a sleeping giant at the front of the room, waiting for its moment to shine. Maya knew from the event schedule that a famous pianist was supposed to perform after dinner. Victor Kozlov, all the way from Vienna. She'd looked him up on her phone during her break and watched videos of him playing. He was incredibly talented, the kind of musician Maya had dreamed of becoming. The piano itself was a work of art. Under the ballroom's lights, its black surface gleamed like still water. Maya could see the Steinway logo from where she stood, and she knew that this particular model was worth more than most people's houses. She'd played on a Steinway once during her conservatory years, and she'd never forgotten the way it felt. The keys responded to the slightest touch, and the sound it produced was pure magic. Maya's fingers moved unconsciously against her serving tray, running through a piece she'd memorized years ago. Chopin's Ballade No. 1. She'd performed it for her senior recital, and it had been one of the proudest moments of her life. Her parents had sat in the front row, beaming with pride even though they didn't understand classical music. Her teacher had tears in his eyes. Maya, table 12 needs more wine, Janet called out. Snapping Maya back to reality, she hurried over with a fresh bottle, carefully pouring for each guest. One of them, a man in his 60s with silver hair, was telling a story about his recent trip to Vienna. The concert hall there is absolutely magnificent, he was saying. We heard this incredible pianist. I think his name was Kozlov. Absolutely brilliant. In fact, I believe he's performing here tonight. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She was going to get to hear Viktor Kozlov play live, even if it was while she was working. She made a mental note to position herself where she could see the piano. When the performance began, as the main course was served, Maya noticed that the energy in the room was building toward something special. People kept glancing toward the piano, and there was an excitement in the air that went beyond just a fancy dinner party. This was what everyone had come for, the musical performance that would cap off the evening. Maya had worked many events at the hotel, but she'd never been this excited about the entertainment. Usually it was just background music to her, something pleasant while she worked. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she would get to watch a world-class pianist perform on a world-class instrument. Even if she was watching from the sidelines while carrying dirty plates. Little did Maya know that in just a few short hours, everything in her life was about to change. The evening that had started as just another shift serving wealthy guests was about to become the most important night of her life. Sometimes the universe has a way of putting you exactly where you need to be, even when you don't realize it's happening. The main course was nearly finished when Maya noticed something strange happening backstage. She was collecting empty plates from table 7 when she saw Linda, the event coordinator, rushing through the service doors with a look of pure panic on her face. Linda was usually the calmest person at any event. Maya had seen her handle everything from kitchen fires to celebrity meltdowns without breaking a sweat. But tonight something was very wrong. Maya tried to focus on her work, but she couldn't help noticing the chaos building behind the scenes. Staff members were whispering urgently to each other, and she caught glimpses of people making frantic phone calls near the kitchen entrance. Whatever was happening, it was big. During her next trip to the kitchen, Maya overheard pieces of a heated conversation between Linda and the hotel's general manager, Mr. Peterson. He was a tall, stern man who rarely showed emotion, but right now his face was red with stress. "What do you mean he can't perform?" Mr. Peterson was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Do you have any idea how much these people paid to be here tonight?" I know, Linda replied, her voice shaking. "The paramedics are with him now. Food poisoning, they think. He's been vomiting for the past hour. There's no way he can play." Maya's heart sank. They were talking about Viktor Kozlov, the famous pianist. The whole evening had been building up to his performance, and now he was sick. She thought about all those wealthy guests in the ballroom, how excited they'd been talking about hearing him play. "Can't we get another pianist?" Mr. Peterson asked, pacing back and forth. "What about that woman who played here last month?" "I've already called everyone," Linda said, holding up her phone with a dozen missed calls on the screen. "It's Saturday night, and this is such short notice. The good pianists are either performing somewhere else or they're out of town. The ones who are available ... quotes, she paused, looking defeated. "Let's just say they're not Viktor Kozlov quality." Maya continued clearing tables, but her mind was racing. She knew exactly what this meant for the evening. The guests had paid $500 per plate, and many of them had come specifically to hear the famous pianist. Without the musical performance, the whole event would feel incomplete. Worse than that, it might affect how much money they raised for the children's hospital. As she worked, Maya could see the subtle signs that news was spreading among the guests. People were checking their phones more often, and conversations at several tables had taken on a concerned tone. Someone had clearly leaked that there was a problem with the evening's entertainment. At table 15, Maya overheard Mrs. Wellington talking to her dinner companions. "I heard there's some issue with the pianist," she was saying, adjusting her pearl bracelet nervously. "Robert's assistant texted him that the performer might be ill." "That would be such a shame," replied the woman sitting next to her. "I was So looking forward to hearing him play. I saw Kozlov perform in London last year and it was absolutely magical. Maya's chest tightened as she listened. These people weren't just disappointed about missing a performance, they genuinely cared about the music. Many of them were classical music lovers who supported the arts throughout the city. They deserved better than this. Back in the service area, the situation was getting worse by the minute. Maya watched as Linda made call after call, each one ending in disappointment. She tried the symphony orchestra's substitute list, called 3 different music schools, and even reached out to some local hotel pianists who usually played in cocktail lounges. "What about Jeremy from the Hilton?" she asked someone on the phone. "He's classically trained, right?" There was a pause, then Linda's shoulders sagged. "Oh, he's playing a wedding in Miami tonight." Maya set down her tray and found herself moving closer to where Linda was standing. She told herself she was just curious, but deep down, she knew something else was pulling her forward. Something that felt like destiny. "The conservatory?" Linda was saying into her phone. "Yes, I know it's late, but surely someone there could ... Another pause. "All the professors are at a conference in Chicago? All of them?" Linda's voice cracked with desperation. Mr. Peterson appeared again, his face even redder than before. "Linda, I just got off the phone with the mayor's office. His wife is asking questions about the entertainment. We cannot, and I repeat, cannot, disappoint these people tonight. The hotel's reputation depends on it." "I understand that," Linda snapped back, her usual professional composure finally cracking. "But unless you know someone who can walk out there and play Rachmaninoff like they've been doing it their whole life, I don't know what else to do." May's hands began to tremble. She thought about her brother Carlos, about the children's hospital, about all those families who needed the money this event was supposed to raise. She thought about the beautiful Steinway sitting silent in the ballroom, waiting for someone to bring it to life. Most of all, she thought about the music itself. All those beautiful pieces that deserved to be heard, that could move people to tears and inspire them to give generously to a cause that mattered. That piano was meant to sing tonight, and she was one of the few people in the building who could make that happen. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "Hope your fancy event goes well tonight, sis. Thanks for all you do for our family." The timing felt like a sign from the universe. She watched as Linda tried one more number, her last hope apparently being a retired pianist who lived across town. Maya could only hear one side of the conversation, but Linda's face told the whole story. "Hello, Mrs. Chun? This is Linda Rodriguez from the Grand Meridian Hotel. Yes, I know it's late notice. Oh, you're in Portland visiting your daughter. I see ... No, that's perfectly fine ... Thank you anyway." Linda hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at her phone like it might magically provide a solution. Around her, the hotel staff waited nervously for instructions. The guests in the ballroom were finishing their dessert, and soon they would be expecting the musical performance that had been promised. "What do we tell them?" asked Janet, who had been watching the drama unfold along with several other waitresses. "I don't know," Linda admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we can ... No, play some recorded music. Offer them vouchers for future events." Maya knew that wouldn't work. These weren't the kind of people who could be bought off with discount coupons. They had come for a specific experience, and they deserved to get it. More importantly, the children's hospital deserved to get the full benefit of their generosity. Taking a deep breath that seemed to draw from somewhere deeper than her lungs, Maya stepped forward. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, but her voice came out surprisingly steady. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Linda looked up, distracted and clearly frustrated at being interrupted during a crisis. "Maya, not now. We're dealing with a situation here." "I know," Maya said, her voice getting stronger. "I think I can help." The words hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. In that moment, Maya felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to either fly or fall. But for the first time in 3 years, she was ready to take the leap. Linda stared at Maya like she'd just spoken in a foreign language. Around them, the kitchen noise seemed to fade into the background as everyone processed what the quiet waitress had just said. Maya could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, but she forced herself to stand tall and maintain eye contact. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Linda asked, her voice carrying a mix of confusion and barely contained irritation. She was clearly not in the mood for jokes or interruptions. "From the staff." "I said I can help," Maya repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. "I can play the piano." For a moment, complete silence fell over the group of hotel staff who had gathered around Linda during the crisis. Then Janet let out a short, nervous laugh. "Maya, this isn't the time for games," Janet said, shaking her head. "We're talking about performing for 300 of the most important people in the city." Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she didn't back down. "I'm not joking. I went to the conservatory. I have a degree in classical piano performance." Linda's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "You dot. The words tumbled out of Maya faster now, like water breaking through a dam. "I graduated from the State Conservatory 3 years ago. Summa cum laude. I can play everything Kozlov was supposed to play tonight, Rachmaninoff, Chopin, Liszt, whatever you need." Mrs. Henderson appeared behind Maya, having heard the commotion. "Maya, what are you talking about? You're a waitress." "I know what I am," Maya said, turning to face her supervisor. "But I also know what I was trained to do. I've been playing piano since I was 12. I studied under Professor Martinez at the conservatory, and I can play at a professional level." Linda was staring at Maya like she was seeing her for the first time. "If you're really a trained pianist, what are you doing working here?" Maya felt the familiar sting of shame that came with explaining her situation. "My family needed money. My father got hurt right before graduation, and I had to help with medical bills and student loans. This job was supposed to be temporary, but—" She shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. "Even if that's true," Mr. Peterson said, having approached during the conversation, "you can't just waltz out there and perform for this crowd. These people expect world-class entertainment." "I understand that," Maya said, feeling her confidence waver slightly under his skeptical gaze. "But what other choice do you have? You've called everyone you can think of, and no one's available. At least let me try." Linda was checking her watch nervously. "The program says the performance starts in 15 minutes. People are finishing their dessert and expecting the show to begin." "Maya," Mrs. Henderson said gently, "I appreciate that you want to help, but this could go very badly. If you mess up out there, it's not just your job on the line. It could affect all of us." Maya understood the weight of what she was asking. The Grand Meridian Hotel's reputation was built on providing flawless service to the city's elite. One bad performance could damage relationships that had taken decades to build. But she also knew something the others didn't. She wasn't just some amateur who had taken a few piano lessons. She was genuinely talented, trained by some of the best teachers in the country. What pieces was Kozlov supposed to play? Maya asked Linda. Linda consulted her clipboard with shaking hands. Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, Debussy's Claire. De Lune and Rachmaninoff's Etude Tableau Op. 33, No. 4. Maya felt a rush of relief. These were pieces she knew by heart. "I've performed all of those. The Chopin was my senior recital piece." "You're serious about this," Linda said, and it wasn't a question. She was studying Maya's face, looking for any sign of doubt or deception. "Dead." "Serious," Maya replied. "Look, I know how this sounds. I know I'm just the help to everyone in that room. But I also know that piano sitting out there deserves to be played by someone who understands it. And those people deserve to hear beautiful music, especially when they're donating money to help sick children." Mr. Peterson was shaking his head. "This is insane. We can't put a waitress on stage in front of the mayor and half the city council. Then what's your alternative?" Maya asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Disappoint 300 donors and explain why the Children's Hospital won't get the money they need tonight?" The mention of the Children's Hospital seemed to hit home with Linda. Maya could see her wavering. caught between the impossibility of the situation and the lack of any other options. Even if we agreed to this, Linda said slowly, you can't perform in your uniform. You'd need something appropriate to wear. The hotel keeps formal clothes in lost and found for situations like this, Mrs. Henderson said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her in surprise. What? I've been here 15 years. I know where everything is. Maya could see Linda doing calculations in her head, weighing the risks against the alternatives. Around them, other staff members were watching with fascination and horror, like they were witnessing either a miracle or a disaster in the making. Let me hear you play something, Linda said suddenly. Not out there, just... Can you play something right now to prove you're not crazy? Maya looked around the kitchen area, confused. There's no piano back here, the lobby, Mrs. Henderson said. There's an upright piano near the concierge desk. We could close off that area for a minute, Linda nodded quickly. Yes, that works. If you can prove to me that you're actually capable of this, then maybe maybe we can try it. Maya's stomach dropped. This was it, the moment of truth. She was about to either prove herself or humiliate herself in front of her coworkers. But she'd come this far, and there was no backing down. Now. Okay, she said, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Let's go. The small group made their way through the hotel's back corridors toward the lobby. Maya's legs felt shaky, and she realized she hadn't actually played a real piano in months. She'd been practicing on her phone app and running through pieces in her head. But that wasn't the same as actually touching keys. As they approached the lobby piano, Maya sent up a silent prayer to whatever forces in the universe had brought her to this moment. She thought about her brother Carlos, about all the families the Children's Hospital had helped, about the beautiful music that deserved to be heard. She thought about the 3 years she'd spent hiding her talent, pretending to be someone she wasn't, letting fear and circumstances keep her from the thing she loved most in the world. Tonight, all of that was about to change. Maya just had to prove she was brave enough to let it happen. The lobby piano came into view, and Maya took a deep breath. This was her audition for the most important performance of her life. The lobby piano sat in the corner like a forgotten friend. It was much smaller than the grand piano in the ballroom, and Maya could see dust on its wooden surface. This wasn't a concert instrument, it was the kind of piano hotels kept for atmosphere. Something pleasant to listen to while guests checked in or waited for their cars. Maya approached the bench slowly, aware that everyone was watching her every move. Linda stood with her arms crossed, checking her watch every few seconds. Mr. Peterson looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Mrs. Henderson gave Maya an encouraging nod, but even she seemed nervous about what was about to happen. What are you going to play? Linda asked, her voice tight with stress. Maya sat down at the bench and adjusted the height, her fingers hovering over the keys. Chopin's Minute Waltz, she said. It's short, and it'll show you what I can do. She took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keyboard. The keys felt different than she remembered, a little heavier than the pianos at the conservatory, not as responsive as the Steinway waiting in the ballroom. But as soon as she pressed the first notes, something magical happened. The music flowed from her fingers like it had been waiting there all along. Every lesson with Professor Martinez, every hour of practice, every tear she'd shed over difficult passages, it all came rushing back. Her hands moved across the keys with confidence she hadn't felt in years, and the melody filled the lobby with pure, crystalline sound. Maya lost herself in the music for those brief minutes. She forgot about the watching eyes, forgot about her uniform, forgot about everything except the joy of playing again. When she reached the final flourish and the last notes faded into silence, she looked up to find everyone staring at her with their mouths open. Holy ... Mr. Peterson started, then caught himself. I mean, that was actually incredible. Linda was shaking her head in disbelief. Maya, why didn't you ever tell us you could do that? Maya stood up from the bench, her hands still, tingling from the contact with the keys. It never seemed relevant to serving tables, she said quietly, but Linda wasn't satisfied with that answer. Relevant, Maya? You just played like a professional. This changes everything. Does it? May asked, and there was more pain in her voice than she'd intended. Because 3 years ago, when I first applied here, I mentioned my music degree on my application. Nobody seemed to care then, Mrs. Henderson winced. Maya, I remember that application, but we needed waitstaff, not musicians. I thought it was just something you'd studied in college, not this. The truth was, people often didn't understand what a conservatory education really meant. They heard music degree and thought of someone who could play Happy Birthday at parties. They didn't realize the years of intensive training, the brutal practice schedules, the level of skill required to actually graduate from a prestigious program. Look, Linda said, checking her watch again, we can talk about this later. Right now, I need to know, are you absolutely certain you can handle performing for the gala? Because if you get out there and freeze up, or if you make mistakes, it won't just be embarrassing. It could be catastrophic. Maya understood what Linda was really asking. The people in that ballroom weren't just any audience. They were donors, politicians, business leaders, people whose opinions carried real weight in the city. If Maya failed spectacularly, it wouldn't just hurt the hotel's reputation. It could affect future fundraising events, damage relationships with important clients, and potentially cost several people their jobs. I won't freeze up, Maya said, and she meant it. But I need to be honest with you about something. I haven't performed in front of an audience in 3 years. I've been practicing in my head and on my phone, but it's not the same as the real thing. Oh, great, Mr. Peterson muttered. So you're out of practice. Not out of practice, Maya corrected. Just out of performance experience. The muscle memory is still there. The training is still there. I just need to trust myself again. Linda was pacing now, her heels clicking against the marble floor. This is insane. This is absolutely insane, but... She stopped and looked directly at Maya. What other choice do we have? Maya could see the exact moment when Linda made her decision. It was the look of someone jumping off a cliff and hoping the parachute would open. Okay, Linda said. Okay, we're doing this. But there are conditions. First, if you mess up out there, you're on your own. I can't protect you from whatever happens after, Maya nodded. She'd expected as much. Second, you need to look the part. Mrs. Henderson, take her to the Lost and Found. Find her something black and elegant. Do something with her hair. Make her look like she belongs on that stage. Mrs. Henderson was already moving toward the elevator. Come on, Maya, we don't have much time. As they rode up to the administrative floor where the Lost and Found was kept, Mrs. Henderson turned to Maya with an expression that was part admiration, part terror. Maya, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once you walk out on that stage, there's no going back. Everyone will know what you can do, and that changes things. It changes how people see you, how they treat you. Are you ready for that? Maya thought about the question as they walked down the hallway. For 3 years, she'd been invisible. She'd served food, cleaned tables, and smiled politely while people looked right through her. She'd hidden the most important part of herself because it seemed easier, safer, more practical. But tonight, watching Linda panic about the missing pianist, seeing the disappointment on the guests' faces, thinking about the children's hospital, that needed the money this event would raise. Tonight she realized that hiding hadn't been practical at all. It had been a waste. I'm ready, she said. The Lost and Found room was bigger than Maya's entire apartment. Racks of clothing lined the walls, expensive items that guests had left behind and never claimed. Mrs. Henderson moved through the racks with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. Here, she said, pulling out a simple black dress. This should fit you. It's elegant but not too flashy, classic. Maya held up the dress. It was beautiful, the kind of thing she'd never been able to afford but had always admired in store windows. The fabric felt like silk. Under her fingers. There's a bathroom down the hall where you can change, Mrs. Henderson said. I'll find you some shoes. As Maya changed into the dress, she caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. The transformation was startling. The simple black dress fit her perfectly, making her look sophisticated and professional. For the first time in 3 years, she looked like someone who belonged in the world of classical music. When she came out, Mrs. Henderson was waiting with a pair of low heels and a small makeup kit. "Sit down. Let me fix your hair and add a little makeup. You need to look polished." As Mrs. Henderson worked, Maya felt like she was putting on armor for battle. Each touch of makeup, each pin in her hair was preparing her for the most important performance of her life. "There," Mrs. Henderson said, stepping back to admire her work. "You look like a different person." Maya looked in the mirror again and barely recognized herself. Gone was the tired waitress with her hair pulled back in a messy bun. In her place stood a confident young woman who looked like she belonged on a concert stage. But the most important change wasn't what she saw in the mirror, it was what she felt inside. For the first time in 3 years, Maya felt like herself again. Maya stood at the edge of the ballroom, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Through the doorway, she could see the sea of elegant guests finishing their dessert, their conversations creating a gentle hum of anticipation. The beautiful Steinway piano sat at the front of the room like a black jewel. Waiting for her. Linda appeared beside her, clipboard in hand and stress written across her face. "Okay, here's how this is going to work," she whispered urgently. "I'm going to go out there and introduce you as our evening's performer. I won't mention your name or background, just that you're a classically trained pianist stepping in for Mr. Kozlov." Maya nodded, trying to focus on Linda's words while her mind raced with everything that could go wrong. What if her fingers cramped up? What if she forgot the pieces she'd known by heart for years? What if the audience could tell she was just a waitress pretending to be something she wasn't? "Remember," Linda continued, "you're not Maya the waitress anymore. You're a professional pianist. Walk out there like you own that stage." Mrs. Henderson squeezed Maya's shoulder gently. "You've got this, dear. Just remember, you belong up there as much as anyone else who's ever played that piano." Maya took a deep breath and looked down at herself one more time. The black dress fit perfectly, and the low heels made her feel taller, more confident. Her hair was pinned up in an elegant style that made her look sophisticated. But more than the clothes, it was the feeling inside her that had changed. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like a musician again. "It's time," Linda said, checking her watch. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Maya replied, and she meant it. Linda walked out onto the small stage area where the piano sat. The room's conversations gradually died down as people noticed her approaching the microphone stand that had been set up for announcements. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda's voice carried clearly through the ballroom, "I have some news about this evening's entertainment. Unfortunately, Mr. Kozlov has been taken ill and will be unable to perform tonight." A disappointed murmur rippled through the crowd. Maya could see people at various tables exchanging concerned looks and checking their phones. "However," Linda continued, her voice gaining strength, "we are fortunate to have secured a replacement performer. Please welcome a classically trained pianist who will be presenting a program of beautiful music for your enjoyment this evening." The applause was polite but reserved. Maya could see in the guests' faces that they were being courteous, while privately wondering who this mystery pianist could be, and whether they would measure up to the famous Viktor Kozlov they'd been promised. This was it. Maya stepped out from behind the curtained area and began walking toward the piano. The room seemed to stretch out endlessly in front of her, and she felt like every eye in the place was watching her every step. She kept her chin up and her shoulders back, remembering all the times Professor Martinez had made her practice, walking onto a stage with confidence. But as she moved through the room, she began to notice something strange happening. At table 12, she saw Mr. Rodriguez, the businessman who'd been talking about his stock portfolio earlier, lean forward with a puzzled expression. At another table, Mrs. Chan, the mayor's wife, was squinting at Maya like she was trying to remember where she'd seen her before. Maya's heart sank as she realized what was happening. Some of these people recognized her as their waitress from earlier in the evening. She could see the confusion spreading across faces as guests tried to reconcile the elegant young woman walking toward the piano with the invisible service staff, who had been refilling their wine glasses. By the time Maya reached the piano bench, the murmuring in the room had grown noticeably louder. She could hear fragments of whispered conversations. "Isn't that? Wait, wasn't she serving our table? Is this some kind of joke?" Maya sat down at the piano bench and adjusted the height, her hands trembling slightly as she found the proper position. The Steinway was even more beautiful up close than she'd imagined. The keys were perfectly weighted, and even her gentle touch produced a rich, warm tone that seemed to fill the entire room. She looked out at the audience and saw a mixture of expressions: confusion, skepticism, curiosity, and in some cases barely concealed annoyance. These people had paid good money to hear a world-class pianist, and instead they were getting someone who had been serving their dinner an hour ago. Maya closed her eyes for a moment and thought about why she was here. This wasn't about proving herself to a room full of wealthy strangers. This was about the music itself, about the children's hospital that needed funding, about all the families like hers who had been helped by the charity this event supported. She thought about her brother Carlos, lying in a hospital bed when he was 8 years old, and how the nurses had played classical music in his room to help him feel calmer during the scary procedures. She thought about all the other children who were in hospitals right now, and how the money raised tonight could help them get the care they needed. When Maya opened her eyes, her hands were steady. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play Chopin's Ballade Note 1 in G minor. The first notes rang out clear and pure, cutting through the whispered conversations like a knife through silk. Maya had chosen this piece deliberately. It was one of the most challenging and beautiful works in the piano repertoire, and if she could play it well, it would prove beyond any doubt that she belonged on this stage. The opening melody was gentle, but complex, requiring precise fingerwork and careful attention to dynamics. Maya felt her muscle memory taking over, her hands finding their way across the keys with the confidence that came from thousands of hours of practice. This was the piece she'd performed for her senior recital, the piece that had made her professor cry with pride. As the music flowed from the piano, something magical began to happen in the room. The conversation stopped completely. Forks were set down on plates as people forgot about their dessert. The skeptical expressions on faces began to change to something else: surprise, then admiration, then genuine awe. Maya lost herself in the music, the way she always had when she played. The ballroom disappeared, the audience disappeared, even her nervousness disappeared. There was only the piano and the music and the pure joy of creating something beautiful. Her fingers danced across the keys with increasing confidence, bringing out every nuance of Chopin's complex composition. The piece built to its dramatic climax, Maya's hands flying across the keyboard in the passages that had once seemed impossible to her younger self, but now they felt natural, like breathing. This was who she was, who she had always been underneath the waitress uniform and the fear and the practical concerns about paying bills. As the final notes of the ballade faded into silence, Maya opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. The room was completely still, as if everyone was holding their breath. For a moment that seemed to last forever, nobody moved. Then, slowly, one person began to clap, then another. Then suddenly the entire room erupted in thunderous applause. People were rising to their feet, their faces showing genuine amazement and appreciation. These weren't polite golf claps. This was the kind of applause reserved for truly exceptional performances. Maya felt tears stinging her eyes as she took in the sight of 300 people giving her a standing ovation. After 3 years of being invisible, of hiding her talent, of convincing herself that her dreams didn't matter, she was finally being seen for who she really was. The applause seemed to go on forever. Maya sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the sound of 300 people clapping with genuine enthusiasm. She could see faces in the crowd that had looked at her with confusion just minutes ago, now beaming with admiration and respect. The transformation was so complete it felt almost magical. Mrs. Wellington, the oil heiress who had barely acknowledged Maya when she'd served her wine earlier, was applauding so enthusiastically that her diamond bracelet caught the light with every clap. At table 15, the tech mogul David Chun was shaking his head in amazement, saying something to his dinner companion that Maya couldn't hear over the applause but could read on his lips. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Maya stood up and took a modest bow, the way Professor Martinez had taught her years ago. "Thank you," she said softly, though her voice was barely audible over the continuing ovation. She felt like she was in a dream, the kind of dream she'd had countless times during her 3 years of waiting tables, but never believed could actually come true. As the applause finally began to die down, voices started calling out from the audience. "Encore!" shouted someone from the back of the room. "Please play another piece," called out Mrs. Chun, the mayor's wife, who was dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "Don't stop now," added another voice. Maya looked toward the side of the room where Linda stood, her clipboard forgotten in her hands and her mouth still slightly open in shock. Linda gave her an encouraging nod and made a gesture that clearly meant keep going. Maya turned back to the audience, her confidence growing with every passing moment. "Thank you so much for that wonderful reception," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room now. "I'd be honored to play another piece for you." She sat back down at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. "This next piece is Debussy's Clair de Lune Moonlight. It's one of my personal favorites, and I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I do." The opening notes of the Debussy floated through the room like a gentle breeze. This piece was completely different from the dramatic Chopin, softer, more impressionistic, like musical watercolors. Maya had always loved how Debussy could paint pictures with sound, and she poured all of her emotion into bringing those pictures to life. As she played, Maya noticed that the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. Earlier, when she'd been serving tables, these same people had been chatting loudly, checking their phones, treating the evening as just another social obligation. Now, they were listening with the kind of focused attention usually reserved for concert halls and opera houses. At table 7, she saw an elderly gentleman with tears streaming down his cheeks. When the piece ended, he stood up and applauded even harder than he had for the first piece. "Brava!" he called out in a voice thick with emotion. "That was sublime!" Maya felt her own eyes filling with tears. This was why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. For moments like this, when a piece could touch someone so deeply that it moved them to tears. She had forgotten how powerful that connection could be, how music could bridge the gap between strangers and create something beautiful and shared. "One more," called out several voices simultaneously. Maya smiled and nodded. She knew exactly what her final piece would be. "For my last selection tonight, I'd like to play Rachmaninoff's Etude Tableau, Opus 33, number 4. This is a piece that requires everything a pianist has to give, and I'm honored to share it with you." The Rachmaninoff was the most technically demanding piece of the evening. It was fast, complex, and emotionally intense, the kind of piece that separated good pianists from great ones. Maya had always thought of it as her personal Mount Everest, the piece that challenged every aspect of her training. As she launched into the opening, her fingers flying across the keys and rapid-fire passages that would have been impossible for most people to even attempt, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt completely alive, completely herself, completely in the moment. The piece built and swirled and crashed like a musical storm, and Maya rode every wave with perfect control. Her hands moved independently across the keyboard, creating layers of melody and harmony that seemed impossible to be coming from just one person. This was the kind of playing that took years to develop, the kind of skill that couldn't be faked or improvised. In the audience, people were leaning forward in their chairs, completely captivated by what they were witnessing. Some of them were classical music lovers who had heard the world's greatest pianists perform, and they recognized immediately that they were watching something special. This wasn't just a talented amateur, this was a musician of genuinely professional caliber, when Maya reached the final, thunderous conclusion of the piece, striking the last chords with all the power and passion she possessed. The silence that followed was even more profound than after her first piece. It was the kind of silence that comes after experiencing something truly extraordinary, when an audience needs a moment to process what they've just witnessed. Then the applause erupted with even greater force than before. People weren't just standing now, they were cheering, whistling, calling out praise. Maya saw grown men wiping tears from their eyes and women clutching their hearts with genuine emotion. "That was absolutely magnificent," called out Mrs. Wellington, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Where have you been hiding?" shouted David Chun with a laugh. "That was world-class." Maya stood and took another bow, but this time she felt different. She wasn't the nervous waitress who had timidly approached the piano 40 minutes ago. She was a musician who had just reminded herself and everyone else what she was truly capable of as she walked away from the piano. The applause following her every step, Maya caught sight of Linda near the side of the room. The event coordinator was clapping enthusiastically, but there were tears streaming down her face. When their eyes met, Linda mouthed the words, "Thank you," with such genuine gratitude that Maya felt her own tears threatening to spill over. The evening's fundraising goal had been completely achieved, and then some. Maya could see guests pulling out their phones, not to check social media or text messages, but to call their assistants and authorize larger donations than they had originally planned. The power of the music had moved them not just emotionally, but to action. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Maya was walking back toward the service area. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, approached her. She was wearing a fancy dress and had been sitting at one of the family tables with her parents. "Excuse me," the little girl said shyly. "Are you really a waitress?" Maya knelt down. So she was at the child's eye level. "I am," she said gently. "But you play piano like the people on TV?" the girl said, her eyes wide with wonder. "You can be more than one thing," Maya told her with a smile. "You can be anything you want to be, and you don't have to choose just one dream." As Maya watched the little girl run back to her parents, chattering excitedly about the piano performance, she realized that something fundamental had shifted inside her. For 3 years, she had been living as half a person, hiding the most important part of herself because it seemed impractical or impossible. Tonight, she had remembered who she really was, and there was no going back. Maya barely slept that night. She lay in her tiny studio apartment, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the evening in her mind. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since she got home, notifications from social media apps she rarely used, missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, and text messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. It turned out that several guests at the gala had recorded her performance on their phones. By midnight, videos of Maya playing Chopin and Rachmaninoff were already spreading across the internet. By morning, one of the videos had over 50,000 views. By the end of the week, it had reached 2 million. The first call came Tuesday morning while Maya was getting ready for her shift at the hotel. She almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something told her to pick up. "Hello, is this Maya Santos?" The voice was professional, confident. "My name is Catherine Brooks, and I'm a talent agent with Premier Artists Management. I represent classical musicians, and I have to tell you, your performance at the Children's Hospital Gala was absolutely extraordinary." Maya sat down heavily. On her bed, still in her hotel uniform? "I'm sorry, what?" "I saw the video that's been circulating online," Catherine continued. "I've been in this business for 20 years, and I can tell real talent when I hear it. Would you be available to meet this week? I think we need to talk about your future." That was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Maya's phone rang constantly. The City Symphony Orchestra called to invite her to audition for their guest artist program. A classical music festival in California wanted to know if she'd be interested in performing at their summer series. 3 different record labels reached out to discuss potential recording contracts. The most surprising call came from Carnegie Hall. "Miss Santos, this is Robert Kim from Carnegie Hall's programming department. We've had a last-minute cancellation in our Emerging Artist series, and we'd like to offer you a debut performance slot. Would you be available in 3 months? Maya had to sit down again. Carnegie Hall, the most famous concert venue in the world, the place where every classical musician dreamed of performing. She'd had posters of Carnegie Hall on her dorm room wall during conservatory. Yes, she managed to say. Yes, I would be very interested. But not all the changes in Maya's life were happening on the phone. Things at the hotel were different too. Word had spread quickly among the staff about what had happened at the gala. When Maya came to work the day after her performance, she found her coworkers looking at her with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. Maya, Mrs. Henderson said, pulling her aside during the morning briefing, I owe you an apology. All these years you've been working here and we never really saw you. We never understood what we had right under our noses. Even Janet, who had always been somewhat cold toward Maya, came up to her during their break. I saw the video online, she said quietly. I had no idea. You're really talented. The hotel's management treated Maya differently too, Mr. Peterson, who had seemed so skeptical about letting her perform, now greeted her warmly whenever he saw her in the halls. The general manager called her into his office to personally thank her for saving the gala and enhancing the hotel's reputation, but the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. Maya was restocking the ballroom supplies when she noticed a familiar figure sitting alone at one of the tables. It was the elderly gentleman who had cried during her performance of Claire de Lune. Excuse me, he said gently. You're the young lady who played piano at the gala, aren't you? Maya nodded, setting down her supply cart. Yes, sir. I wanted to thank you, he said, his voice soft with emotion. You see, that Debussy piece was my late wife's favorite. She passed away 6 months ago, and I haven't been able to listen to classical music since then. It was too painful. But when you played it the other night, for the first time since she died, I remembered the joy the music used to bring us both. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Maya felt tears stinging her eyes. This was why music mattered. Not for her fame or money or career opportunities, but for moments like this, when it could heal someone's heart. The Children's Hospital reached out to Maya as well. The gala had raised more money than any previous year, partly because her performance had inspired several guests to increase their donations on the spot. They offered her a position as artist-in-residence, performing monthly concerts for patients and their families. Music has incredible healing power, the hospital's director told her during their meeting. What you did at the gala showed us that you understand that. We'd love to have you share that gift with the children and families who need it most. Maya accepted immediately. The pay wasn't huge, but combined with the performance opportunities that were starting to come her way, it would be enough to let her leave the hotel and pursue music full-time 2 weeks after the gala. Maya gave her notice at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Mrs. Henderson actually hugged her, something that had never happened in 3 years of working together. I'm proud of you, Mrs. Henderson said. And I'm sorry it took us so long to see who you really are. The transition wasn't easy. Maya had to learn how to navigate the classical music world again after 3 years away. She had to rebuild her repertoire, update her headshots, and remember how to talk about herself as a professional musician rather than just someone who could play piano. But she had help. Catherine Brooks, the talent agent, became not just Maya's representative, but also her mentor, guiding her through auditions and helping her choose which opportunities to pursue. Professor Martinez, her old teacher from the conservatory, welcomed her back for refresher lessons and helped her prepare for her Carnegie Hall debut. The debut concert was everything Maya had dreamed it would be. Walking onto that famous stage, seeing the packed audience, feeling the perfect acoustics of the legendary hall, it was the culmination of years of training and dreaming and hoping. But as Maya sat at the beautiful concert grand piano and prepared to play her opening piece, she wasn't thinking about fame or success or vindication. She was thinking about the little girl at the gala who had asked if she was really a waitress. She was thinking about the elderly man who had found his way back to music through her performance. She was thinking about her brother Carlos and about all the children in the hospital who would hear her play in the months to come. Most of all, she was thinking about the lesson she'd learned that night at the gala, that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. That sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, even when you can't see it at the time. And that the most extraordinary things can happen when you finally find the courage to show the world who you really are, as Maya began to play, filling Carnegie Hall with the beautiful sound of Chopin's Ballade No. 1, the same piece that had changed her life just months before. She smiled. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. And it had all started with a single moment of courage at a hotel gala when a waitress decided to stop hiding and start living her truth.